The single strand of hair trapped was found in the seal of the evidence bag on a Tuesday morning in November, 8 months into the investigation of the Riverside Strangler case. The hair was auburn, distinctly different from the victim's blonde strands, and it was coiled against the clear plastic where the adhesive strip had been pressed shut. My hands froze as I held the bag under the fluorescent lights of the forensic lab at the Seattle Police Department. This was not supposed to be there. Evidence bags were sterile, sealed by crime scene technicians wearing full protective gear. A stray hair in the seal meant contamination, or worse, tampering. I ran the hair through the database, matching it against samples we had collected from everyone involved in the investigation. The results came back in less than an hour, and when I saw the name on the screen, my blood turned to ice. The hair belonged to Detective Warren Huxley, my partner for the past 3 years, the man I had trusted with my life, the man who had been working this case beside me from day one. And in that moment, I realized I had been hunting a killer who had been sitting right next to me the entire time. My name is Dominic Crane, and I was 32 years old, a forensic analyst with the Seattle Police Department. I had been working in the crime lab for 7 years, specializing in trace evidence, fibers, hair, DNA, and other microscopic clues that solved cases. My job was to take the fragments of chaos left behind at crime scenes and turn them into answers. I loved the work because it was logical, methodical, and precise. Evidence did not lie. People did, but evidence told the truth. The Riverside Strangler case had started in March. 5 women, all in their late 20s to early 30s, had been murdered in a span of 6 months. The victims were found near the riverbank, strangled with a thin cord, their bodies positioned carefully, almost respectfully. There was no sexual assault, no robbery, just death. The killer left no fingerprints, no DNA, and no witnesses. It was the kind of case that haunted detectives and frustrated forensic teams. Detective Warren Huxley had been assigned as the lead investigator, and he had requested me as his forensic partner. Warren was 41, a veteran detective with 15 years on the force. He was smart, thorough, and relentless. We worked well together, spending long hours analyzing evidence and chasing leads. I trusted him completely, until I found that hair. I did not tell anyone immediately. I needed to be sure. I needed to verify the match and eliminate any possibility of cross-contamination. I pulled Warren's personnel file and obtained a reference sample of his DNA from the database. All officers and analysts had their profiles on file for elimination purposes. I ran the comparison 3 times, using different equipment and protocols. Every test came back the same. The hair in the evidence bag was Warren's. There was no mistake. I sat alone in the lab, staring at the results, my mind racing. How had his hair gotten into a sealed evidence bag? The bag had been collected from the 4th victim's crime scene, a woman named Simone Archer. It contained fibers from the ligature used to strangle her. I had processed that bag myself, logging it into evidence and storing it in the secure vault. The only people with access to the vault were me, Warren, and the evidence custodian. If Warren's hair was in the seal, it meant he had opened the bag, touched the evidence, and resealed it. But why? The answer was obvious, and it made me feel sick. Warren had been at every crime scene. Warren had been the first detective to arrive, the one who secured the perimeter and directed the collection of evidence. Warren had access to everything. If he was the killer, he had been controlling the investigation from the inside, ensuring no evidence pointed to him. I spent the next 2 days secretly reviewing every piece of evidence from all 5 murders. I stayed late at the lab, working alone after everyone else had gone home. I went through photographs, reports, and samples, looking for anything that connected Warren to the crimes. What I found was a pattern so subtle, so carefully hidden, that I had missed it entirely. At every crime scene, there were small inconsistencies in the evidence chain. Bags that had been opened and resealed. Samples that had been logged at slightly different times than the crime scene reports indicated. Notes that Warren had added to files, suggesting certain leads and dismissing others. He had been steering the investigation away from himself, planting false trails and eliminating evidence that might have exposed him. I also found something else. 3 of the victims had filed police reports in the months before their deaths. Minor incidents, nothing serious. A stolen purse, a suspicious vehicle, a noise complaint. Warren had been the responding officer on all 3 reports. He had met the victims before they were killed. He had access to their information, their addresses, their routines. He had chosen them, studied them, and then murdered them. And he had done it all while pretending to hunt for the killer. I knew I had to go to someone, but I could not go to Warren's supervisor. If I was wrong, I would destroy his career. If I was right, I would become a target. I reached out to the only person I could trust, an FBI forensic specialist named Octavia Brennan. I had worked with her on a previous case, and I knew she was brilliant and discreet. I sent her an encrypted message explaining the situation and asking her to meet me. We met at a coffee shop far from the precinct, in a neighborhood where no one would recognize us. I showed her the evidence, the hair, the DNA match, the inconsistencies in the chain of custody, and the connection between Warren and the victims. Octavia reviewed everything carefully, her expression growing darker with each page. "This is credible," she said finally. "But it is also incredibly dangerous. If Warren is the killer, he has been manipulating this investigation for months. He knows forensic protocols, he knows how we think, and he knows what evidence to destroy. If he realizes you are onto him, you are in serious danger." "I know," I said. "What do I do?" She leaned forward, her voice low. "You document everything. You secure copies of all the evidence in a location he cannot access. And then you go to the FBI. We can take over the investigation and arrest him without alerting him. But you need to act fast. If he suspects anything, he will disappear or destroy evidence. Or worse, he will kill again." I spent the next week working in secret. I made copies of every file, every photograph, every piece of evidence. I uploaded everything to a secure cloud server that only Octavia and I had access to. I also started wearing a hidden recording device whenever I was around Warren. I needed to gather more evidence, and I needed to protect myself if he became suspicious. Warren did not seem to notice anything different. We continued working the case together, reviewing leads and analyzing new evidence. He was calm, professional, and focused, the same partner I had always known. But now, when I looked at him, I saw someone else. I saw the man who had strangled 5 women and hidden behind a badge. One afternoon, we were reviewing the autopsy report from the most recent victim, a woman named Felicity Monroe. She had been found 2 weeks earlier, and the medical examiner had noted bruising on her wrists that suggested she had been restrained before being killed. Warren studied the report, his expression thoughtful. "He is getting bolder," Warren said. "The restraints are new. He is escalating." I nodded, keeping my voice steady. "What do you think it means?" Warren looked at me, his eyes cold and analytical. "Means he is confident. He thinks he is smarter than us. And so far he has been right." The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. It was not the analysis of a detective. It was the pride of a killer. That night I met with Octavia again. I played her the recording of my conversation with Warren. She listened carefully, her jaw tightening. "He is taunting you," she said. "He is enjoying this. He thinks he is untouchable. We need to move now," I said. "If he kills again, it is on us." Octavia nodded. "The FBI is ready. We have been building a case based on the evidence you provided. We are going to arrest him tomorrow morning at his home, before he goes to work. You need to stay away from him until then. Do not give him any reason to suspect." I agreed, but I knew it would be difficult. Warren and I were supposed to review evidence together the next morning. I would have to find a reason to cancel without raising suspicion. I sent him a text saying I was feeling sick and would work from home. He replied immediately, "Feel better. I will handle things at the lab." That message should have been reassuring, but it was not. The idea of Warren alone in the lab, with access to all the evidence, filled me with dread. Called Octavia. "He is going to be at the lab tomorrow," I said. "If he realizes we are onto him, he could destroy everything." She was silent for a moment. Then we move tonight. I will coordinate with Seattle PD. We are bringing him in now. The arrest happened at 11 o'clock that night. I was not there, but Octavia called me as it was happening. FBI agents and Seattle police officers surrounded Warren's house, a modest two-story home in a quiet suburb. When they knocked on the door, Warren answered calmly, dressed in sweatpants and a t-shirt, as if he had been expecting them. He did not resist. He did not run. He simply asked what this was about, and when they told him he was under arrest for the murders of 5 women, he smiled. It was a small, cold smile that made the lead agent take a step back. I did not do this, Warren said. But good luck proving it. They searched his house and found everything. A storage box in the basement containing ligatures identical to the ones used in the murders. A laptop with detailed files on each victim, including photos he had taken while surveilling them. A journal where he had documented his feelings before and after each kill. He had not hidden the evidence because he did not think anyone would ever search his home. He had been so confident in his control over the investigation that he had become careless. When Octavia called to tell me what they had found, I felt a rush of relief so intense I nearly collapsed. We got him, she said. It is over. But it was not over. Not yet. Warren was arraigned the next morning. The charges were 5 counts of first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. The media exploded. The story of a detective who had been hunting himself dominated every news channel. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, interviewing anyone connected to the case. My name was kept out of the initial reports, but it did not stay that way for long. A journalist discovered that I was the forensic analyst who had uncovered the evidence, and suddenly I was being called a hero. I did not feel like a hero. I felt like someone who had been blind for 8 months, working beside a killer and never seeing the truth. The guilt was overwhelming. I kept thinking about the victims, about the hours I had spent analyzing evidence while Warren sat next to me, knowing exactly what I would find because he had controlled what was there. I thought about Felicity Monroe, the most recent victim, and wondered if I could have saved her if I had discovered the truth sooner. Octavia told me I could not think that way. You did everything right, she said. You found the evidence, you followed protocol, and you stopped him. 5 women are dead, but how many more would have died if you had not acted? Her words helped, but they did not erase the weight. Warren's trial began in February. I was called to testify as the primary forensic witness. Walking into that courtroom and seeing him at the defense table was one of the hardest things I had ever done. He looked different now, thinner and paler. His confidence replaced by a hollow intensity. When I took the stand, he stared at me the entire time. His expression unreadable. I testified about the hair I had found, the DNA match, the inconsistencies in the evidence chain, and the documents recovered from his home. I explained how he had manipulated the investigation, controlled the flow of information, and positioned himself as the lead detective to avoid suspicion. The defense attorney tried to discredit me, suggesting that the evidence had been contaminated or that I had fabricated the connection because of personal animosity. But the evidence was airtight. The DNA, the journal, the ligatures, everything pointed to Warren. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Warren showed no emotion as the verdict was read. He just sat there staring straight ahead as if the outcome did not matter. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, he looked at me one last time. And for just a second that cold smile returned. The aftermath of the trial was overwhelming. I was hailed as the analyst who had brought down a corrupt detective and solved one of Seattle's most notorious cases. I was invited to speak at forensic conferences, featured in articles about criminal justice, and offered consulting positions with private firms. But I did not want any of it. I wanted to go back to the quiet, methodical work of the lab, where evidence was simple and truth was clear. I took a leave of absence from the Seattle Police Department. I needed time to process everything, to heal from the trauma of working beside a killer and the guilt of not seeing it sooner. I went to therapy, talking through the experience with a counselor who specialized in trauma for first responders. The sessions helped, but the nightmares continued. I kept dreaming about the victims, about the moment I found the hair, about Warren's smile. In March I received a letter. It was from Warren, sent from the state penitentiary. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. The letter was short, written in Warren's precise handwriting. Dominic, it began. You were always the best analyst I worked with. Thorough, smart, and relentless. That is why I chose you as my partner. I knew you would never suspect me, and for a long time I was right. But I also knew that if anyone could catch me, it would be you. I do not regret what I did. Those women were weak, and I gave them purpose. But I do respect you. You played the game better than I expected. The letter was unsigned. I read it twice, then burned it. I would not give him the satisfaction of a response. I returned to work in April, but I requested a transfer. I could not stay in the same lab, surrounded by reminders of Warren and the case. I moved to the FBI Forensic Lab in Quantico, Virginia, working under Octavia. It was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild my career in a place where no one knew my history. The work at Quantico was different, more intense and higher profile. I worked on cases from across the country, analyzing evidence and providing expert testimony. I was good at it, and slowly I began to feel like myself again. But I also knew I would never be the same person I was before I found that hair. I had learned that evil could hide in plain sight, that trust could be weaponized, and that the people we worked beside could be the very ones we were hunting. In June, I was asked to develop a training program for forensic analysts on recognizing evidence tampering and internal corruption. I agreed, using Warren's case as the central example. The program was well received, implemented at labs across the country, and credited with improving protocols for evidence security. I also started speaking publicly about the case, not to glorify what I had done, but to educate others. I wanted forensic professionals to know the warning signs, to trust their instincts, and to act when something felt wrong. Because if I had ignored that single hair, Warren would still be out there, and more women would be dead. One afternoon in August, I received a call from the mother of one of the victims. Her name was Delilah Archer, and her daughter Simone had been the fourth victim, the one whose evidence bag had contained Warren's hair. She asked if we could meet, and I agreed. We met at a small park near her home. She was a kind woman in her 60s, her grief still raw. She thanked me for finding the truth and bringing her daughter's killer to justice. Because of you, she said, I can finally sleep at night. I know the man who took my daughter is in prison, and he will never hurt anyone else. That is because of you. I did not know what to say. I had spent months feeling guilty, and her gratitude was overwhelming. I just did my job, I said quietly. She shook her head. No, you did more than that. You cared enough to look closer. You cared enough to act. My daughter's life mattered because you made sure the truth came out. That conversation stayed with me. It reminded me why I had chosen this career, why I had spent years analyzing fragments of evidence in pursuit of justice. It was not about recognition or heroism. It was about giving victims and their families the truth they deserved. In September, I was approached by a true crime documentary producer. They wanted to create a series about the Riverside Strangler case, focusing on how a forensic analyst had uncovered the killer from within the investigation. I was hesitant, but Octavia encouraged me to participate. Your story matters, she said. It shows that the system can work, that good people can stop bad people, even when they are in positions of power. I agreed, and the production team spent 3 months filming. They interviewed me, Octavia, the FBI agents who arrested Warren, and the families of the victims. The documentary, titled The Hair That Solved It, How One Strand Exposed a Killer, premiered on a major streaming platform in December. It was watched by millions of people. The response was overwhelming. Forensic professionals reached out, thanking me for highlighting the importance of trace evidence. Families of victims from other cases contacted me, asking for help. The documentary sparked conversations about corruption in law enforcement and the need for stronger oversight. It also brought attention to the victims, giving them the recognition they deserved. Their stories were told with dignity and respect, and their families were given a platform to speak. That was the most important part. By the end of the year, I had settled into my new life in Quantico. I was no longer just the analyst who had caught Warren Huxley. I was someone who had rebuilt, who had turned trauma into purpose. I also reconnected with my family. I had been so consumed by the case and its aftermath that I had neglected the people who mattered most. My parents, my younger sister, my childhood friends. I made an effort to call more, to visit, to be present. In January, I was promoted to senior forensic analyst and given leadership over a team of young analysts. I took the responsibility seriously, mentoring them and teaching them not just the science of forensics but the ethics. I told them about Warren, about the importance of integrity, and about trusting their instincts when something felt wrong. One of my analysts, a young woman named Tabitha, approached me after a training session. She told me she had been inspired to pursue forensics after watching the documentary. "You showed me that this work matters," she said. "That evidence can change lives." Smiled. "Can," I said. "But only if we are willing to look for the truth, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it is dangerous, and even when it is sitting right beside us." In March, exactly 2 years after the first murder, I attended a memorial service for the 5 victims. The families had organized the event, inviting law enforcement, forensic professionals, and community members. It was held at a park overlooking the river, the same river where the bodies had been found. Each victim was honored with a speech, a photograph, and a moment of silence. When it was my turn to speak, I stood before the crowd and told them the truth. "I did not save these women," I said. "I could not bring them back. But I made sure their killer was caught, and I made sure their stories were told. They deserved justice, and I am grateful I could be part of giving them that." After the service, the families came up to me one by one, shaking my hand and thanking me. It was emotional, cathartic, and healing. I realized that I had been carrying the weight of their deaths for 2 years, and this was the moment I could finally set it down. I had done everything I could. I had found the truth. I had stopped the killer. And I had honored the victims. That was enough. Warren appealed his conviction in April, claiming his trial had been unfair and that the evidence had been improperly obtained. The appeal was denied. The judge ruled that the evidence was legally obtained, properly analyzed, and overwhelming. Warren would spend the rest of his life in prison. I did not follow the appeal closely. I had moved on, focusing on my work and my life. But when I heard the news, I felt a quiet sense of closure. The case was truly over. Warren was where he belonged, and the system had worked. In June, I was invited to speak at a National Forensic Science Conference in Washington, D.C. The topic was Trace Evidence and Internal Corruption, using forensic science to hold law enforcement accountable. I accepted, and the presentation was attended by over 1,000 forensic professionals, law enforcement officers, and policymakers. I told Warren's story, not to glorify myself, but to teach. I explained the importance of independent analysis, the need for secure evidence protocols, and the courage required to act when something is wrong. The audience gave me a standing ovation. Afterward, several police departments approached me, asking for consulting on their evidence protocols. Professional organizations invited me to serve on ethics committees. I had become a voice for accountability in forensics, and I took that responsibility seriously. In August, I started writing a book. It was not just about the case, but about the broader issues of corruption, integrity, and the forensic science that solves crimes. I wanted to create a resource for analysts, investigators, and anyone interested in how justice works. The writing process was therapeutic. It forced me to revisit the case, to analyze my decisions, and to understand what I had learned. I wrote about the moment I found the hair, the investigation that followed, and the lessons I carried with me. The book, titled The Evidence Does Not Lie, A Forensic Analyst's Journey to Expose a Killer, was published the following spring. It became a bestseller in the true crime and forensic science categories. Reviews praised it for being educational, engaging, and brutally honest. One reviewer called it required reading for anyone working in criminal justice. The book was adopted as a textbook in forensic science programs and used in training sessions for law enforcement. It reached a wider audience than I ever expected, and the response was overwhelming. People wrote to me, sharing their own stories of corruption, betrayal, and justice. Many of them thanked me for giving them hope that the system could work. In October, I received an award from the International Association of Forensic Sciences. It was the Distinguished Service Award, given to professionals who had made significant contributions to the field. The ceremony was held in London, and I was invited to speak. Standing on that stage, looking out at forensic professionals from around the world, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. I had started my career wanting to solve puzzles, to find truth in fragments. I never imagined I would uncover a killer from within my own team, or that the work would lead me here. I spoke about the importance of integrity, the power of evidence, and the responsibility we all carry. We are the last line of defense, I said. We stand between chaos and justice. And we must do that work with honesty, courage, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. The applause was deafening. After the ceremony, forensic professionals from dozens of countries approached me, asking questions and sharing their own experiences. The connections I made that night were invaluable, and they reminded me that this work was bigger than any one case. It was a global effort to hold the guilty accountable and protect the innocent. By the end of that year, I had fully rebuilt my life. I was no longer haunted by nightmares or consumed by guilt. I had processed the trauma, honored the victims, and turned the experience into something meaningful. I also started a non-profit organization called the Truth Project, dedicated to supporting forensic professionals who uncovered corruption or faced retaliation for exposing misconduct. We provided legal resources, counseling, and advocacy. The response was immediate. Within the first 6 months, we helped over 30 forensic professionals navigate difficult situations, from whistleblower complaints to career transitions. We also partnered with universities to fund scholarships for students pursuing forensic science, ensuring the next generation was trained not just in technique but in ethics. The work was rewarding, and it gave me a sense of purpose beyond casework. I was no longer just analyzing evidence. I was building a community of professionals committed to doing the right thing, even when it was hard. In January, I was invited to testify before a congressional committee on forensic science reform. I spoke about the need for independent oversight, stronger evidence protocols, and protections for analysts who report misconduct. Several of my recommendations were incorporated into proposed legislation. In March, exactly 3 years after I found the hair, I returned to Seattle for the first time since leaving. I visited the lab where I had worked, now under new leadership with updated protocols. The analysts there welcomed me warmly, many of them thanking me for the changes that had been implemented because of the case. I also visited the park where the memorial service had been held. I stood by the river, looking out at the water, and I thought about the 5 women whose lives had been taken. I thought about Simone, whose evidence bag had contained the hair that exposed the truth. I thought about how a single strand, so small and easily overlooked, had brought down a killer. Forensic science was about that, finding meaning in fragments, building truth from pieces, and never giving up until the puzzle was solved. That evening I had dinner with Octavia. We had stayed close over the years, and she had become not just a colleague, but a friend. "Thank you for believing me," I said. "When I came to you with the evidence, you did not dismiss it. You acted." She smiled. "I believed the evidence, Dominic. And I believed you. That is what good forensics is about. Trust the science, trust your instincts, and act." We toasted to the work, to the victims, and to the future. It was a quiet, meaningful moment, and it reminded me that even in the darkest cases, there were people who stood for truth. In June, I was contacted by the FBI Academy. They wanted me to teach a course on forensic integrity and corruption detection. It was a 6-week intensive program for new agents and analysts. I agreed, and the teaching experience was transformative. Working with young professionals who were just starting their careers reminded me why this work mattered. I told them Warren's story, not to scare them, but to prepare them. Corruption exists, I said. And it exists in places we do not expect. But if we are vigilant, if we trust the evidence and act with integrity, we can stop it. The students were engaged, asking thoughtful questions and sharing their own concerns. Many of them told me the course had changed how they thought about their work. One student, a young analyst named Felix, approached me after the final class. "You taught me that forensics is not just about solving crimes," he said. "It is about protecting the system itself." "That is exactly right," I said. "And that is the most important work we can do." The course became a permanent part of the FBI Academy curriculum, and I was invited to teach it every year. It was an honor, and it gave me a way to ensure the lessons of Warren's case would continue to protect future investigations. In September, I was invited to speak at the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime in Vienna. The topic was forensic science and its role in fighting corruption within law enforcement. It was a prestigious invitation, and I spent weeks preparing the presentation. Standing in that international forum, addressing representatives from over 100 countries, I felt the full weight of how far this journey had taken me. From a single hair in an evidence bag to a global conversation about integrity and accountability. I spoke about the importance of independent forensic labs, the need for whistleblower protections, and the power of evidence to hold even the most trusted individuals accountable. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Several countries expressed interest in adopting the protocols I recommended, and I was invited to consult on international forensic standards. The work was expanding beyond anything I had imagined, and I was grateful for the opportunity to make a difference on a global scale. But I never forgot where it started. In a small lab in Seattle, with a single strand of auburn hair and the courage to ask the hard question, who does this belong to? By the end of 2022, the Truth Project had grown significantly. We had offices in 3 cities, a team of 15 staff members, and partnerships with forensic labs across the country. We had helped over 200 professionals, secured policy changes at dozens of institutions, and provided training to thousands of analysts. The work was thriving, and I was proud of what we had built. My personal life was also fulfilling. I had found balance, something I had struggled with for years. I continued my work at Quantico, taught at the FBI Academy, and led the Truth Project. I also made time for the things that mattered, family, friends, and hobbies I had neglected. I started running again, something I had loved before the case consumed my life. I traveled, visiting places I had always wanted to see. And I allowed myself to feel joy, something I had not permitted myself for a long time. In December, I received a letter from Delilah Archer, Simone's mother. She wrote to tell me that she had started a foundation in her daughter's name, providing support to families of murder victims. She credited me with inspiring her to turn grief into action. "Your courage gave me courage," she wrote. "And now I am using that courage to help others. Thank you for showing me that healing is possible." It is 2023 now, and I am 37 years old. I am no longer defined by the case that changed my life, but I carry its lessons with me every day. I am a senior forensic analyst, an educator and advocate, and a voice for integrity in a field that demands it. The single hair that exposed Warren Huxley was not just a piece of evidence. It was a reminder that truth can be found in the smallest details, that courage means acting even when it is dangerous, and that justice is possible when we refuse to look away. Warren is in prison, where he will remain for the rest of his life. The 5 women he killed are remembered, honored, and mourned. And the system that allowed him to hide has been changed, made stronger and more accountable because people refused to accept that a detective could be a killer. My name is Dominic Crane, and I am the forensic analyst who discovered the killer was beside him. I did not do it alone. I had support, allies, and the power of evidence on my side. But I did do it. And I will spend the rest of my career making sure others have the tools, the courage, and the support to do the same. Because evil hides in plain sight. But truth, no matter how small, will always find a way to the light.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoy watching Karma, Payback, come full circle every week, we dive into tales of betrayal and poetic justice. Don't miss the next one. Tap the subscribe button and join the Revenge Squad.